Good morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas, and today we're going to talk about everything from the perfect wash light to a play's subject matter on Light Talk.
And this is David, broadcasting from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood in Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
Especially on Saturdays. I'm a Lumen Brother on Saturday.
Hey guys, guess what? Yesterday we hit it. The big 50,000. 50,000 downloads.
Okay.
Let's move on. So anyway.
Somehow it's anticlimactic.
Totally anticlimactic since we've been talking about it forever. And they finally announced us at LDI. We'll be doing another live show at LDI. You know, we didn't talk about the format, but we probably should. You want to do another Stump the Chumps where everybody puts a question in a hat and we just answer them?
No, because they always direct them to me.
That's true. You got the most call-outs.
So no.
Steve, what do you think?
I think we have someone at the door. We give them a little index card. They write a question if they want to. We take all the index cards to the front. We spend 5 minutes. We find 8 questions, and those are the ones we answer.
I'm good with that.
Okay. You guys like screening questions. All right.
Yes, we do.
All right.
We need to have a little bit of censorship here.
I'm just tired. I'm that question of boxers or briefs. I just thought that was inappropriate.
Did you inhale or did you not? I mean, come on.
Okay. So anyway, that's what we have planned for LDI. We hope that you all show up. It's at, 4:30 on Saturday, I think is the time.
Right after the portfolio review.
Yeah, it's right after about a half hour after portfolio review. And because we'll be at the portfolio review as well. And, please join us. Okay, so let's get started.
I got the first question.
That's right. Go, Stan.
All right. Well, Gabriel in Sweden writes, is it just my imagination or is everyone building great LED Licos? I think you're in touch with reality, Gabriel. I think there's a lot of LED Licos coming out on the market. They're all over the place, and a lot of them are pretty good. So yeah, no, I don't think it's your imagination. I think it's a shift. It's a shift that some of us anticipated about 10 years ago. It was just going to take time for those emitters to get brighter. It was going to take time for mechanisms to concentrate the light at the gate of the fixture. It was going to take time for the rendering qualities of LEDs. And I would say, as we've said before, that has arrived. I don't have a particular favorite. I've got a couple at my institution. I've seen some really lovely stuff. I guess now it's just companies are competing on price and quality. What do you guys think?
I don't think everyone's making great LED Licos. I think there's a couple companies out there making a really good LED Lico. What I would recommend, again, is that you look at a body of them. And what you're going to find is that quality, output, color mixing is all over the place. So, yes, there's a lot of Licos out there, but not a lot of great ones.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking I don't usually shop the second tier fixtures, so I'm responding to the major players.
I think even among the major players, there are some differences. I'm not going to name names here, but I've tested a lot of these, for this magazine that I write for. And there is a definite difference in quality and brightness between two competing manufacturers. And there are some surprisingly good ones, I must tell you. I'll tell you, I tested the Elation ones. We actually bought several of the Elations, and they're very good. And I know that obviously the ETC stuff is good. But has anyone tried the lower priced ETC Lico?
You mean the color source?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I put them up against their lusters. I wasn't necessarily looking at brightness. I was looking at skin and rendering, mm-hmm. And I thought, it depends. And I was looking at it for a high school, right? With the level of discernment is, let's say, medium. And I thought for a high school, it was pretty good. Whether it's going to work for Alvin Ailey or a very, very discerning scenario, maybe you need a 7-color fixture. But the 5-color LED I thought was pretty good, and I haven't compared it to other manufacturers who are making 5-color. But I thought the color source was pretty good, and there's a lot of the lime emitter to sort of increase the brightness there. So they're actually, in terms of perceived brightness, similar to the seven color units. And I have some Chevets which are 5-color in my light lab, and I don't think they're incredibly bright, but I think they're a good fixture. So back to his question, I mean, he's really asking, is everyone built? And Steve's point is that probably not everyone is building a great LED Leco, but I think if you're looking at the major brands, there's some good stuff. I mean, an RGB Leco from Acme Company in the middle of nowhere, maybe not, but you have to shop smart.
Absolutely.
So I would say in response to that, though, there are some good RBG LED Lecos out there. So I don't think you have to have a 5 or a 7 LED emitter to achieve really good color on stage.
Well, let me add to that. I haven't seen the fixtures that Steve is talking about, but I would like to. And I can remember years ago there was some papers written by some vision scientists that were saying that your trichromatic vision, where you have 3 types of responders in your eye, are not narrow band, they're broadband. So if you were able to strike the red, green, and blue emitters in your eyes at their peak response, you would get full spectrum rendering, full spectrum experience, even if you didn't have a light at that particular frequency filling the gaps like a 7-color does. So if they've achieved that, that's pretty remarkable, and I can't wait to see it myself. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I know that has always been the knock on RGB, and then they end up adding an amber, then they end up adding a clear, a white, But boy, if they're getting to this this level of accuracy, that's great.
It's the sweet spot. You got to hit the sweet spot response of the three cone types, or the three sensors in your eye, because really you see full spectrum with 3-color vision. So if you could get that response from that light, that I'm really excited to see that, Steve, because I've been thinking about that for years, but I had not seen it. So that's really, and they know what the peak response in nanometers is of your senses in general. So that's pretty great.
All I'm pointing out is that we have to be careful when we're buying lights. And again, the best way to buy a light is to have that dealer, whomever it is, come to your theater and you do a side-by-side comparison with the 3 or 4 manufacturers you're thinking about doing. Put it through its test. So, I mean, we can all read a spec sheet, right, but then I think it's best to really experience it not in the showroom, but in your theater space. Okay, we have a question from Moscow, and it is Isaac. And Isaac wants to know, what is the very best wash light out there and why? Well, that's easy, Isaac. I'll tell you what to buy right now. Get yourself a Par 64.
That's true.
It's variable focus. It has that wonderful incandescent lamp in it. It's punchy and bitey, and it's just a wonderful light. Now, if you don't want to do that, let's take a look at moving lights and non-moving lights. I would say, again, major manufacturers, if you go to their profile, the profile is going to give you a nice wash, and you're going to be able to use it as a spot also. And there's a couple companies out there building those. But if I'm just going to go with a wash, I'm going to admit it, I like the Philips Punch Light 220. It's a high-performance light. It's RBG. It's about 4,000 lumens coming off of it. I'm replacing my Par cans with the Punch Light 220. The thing that I like about it, which I thought was kind of a novelty, but it's turning out to be a really good feature, is it has a motorized zoom on it.
I don't have a lot of experience in wash lights because forever, I mean, for the past 30 years, I said, why buy Fresnels? I mean, just buy a Leco and put a piece of frost in front of it. I have a lot more control than a Fresnel, and I'll probably get better light. It'll probably be stronger. And I've always thought that was a waste of money, having a wash light. And that sort of moved into how I used moving lights as well. As long as the moving light has really good diffusion, then you're going to be okay. However, lately, I have been experiencing some wash lights out there. And my all-time favorite to this day, I mean, if indeed I had to spec out a wash light that was also a moving light, it would definitely be the Clay Paky BI. I just think these lights are terrific. They got great color rendition. They've got great color fading, and they're super powerful. You know, I used them in Italy when I did that My Fair Lady this year, and they blew me away. I mean, I was able to do so much with them from box boom positions. Yes, they are expensive, but you're getting really top quality out of those. But, you know, it's not fair because I haven't used a lot of the other wash lights, so I'm just telling you my experience.
I don't know, David. I think I agree with you. Clay Paky makes a wonderful light, but I'm starting to think maybe the wash light as a mover is a no-go. I think people are moving beyond it and going, as you say, to a light that can be a profile or a spot or a wash all in one.
Right. But you know something that's really interesting is that I have found that a lot of these lighting manufacturers, they're really not focusing on the diffusion. Looking at all the new lights, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're just not creating good diffusion filters. And I would love to see a much more variable and flexible diffusion filter so we can go ahead and use them as wash lights if we want to.
I haven't played with it, but I'm wondering if you could have a glass 119 made.
I tried this. Let me tell you the quick story. About 10 years ago, I was doing a show in Toronto, and they had a bunch of VL 3500 spots. And I love the 3500. I've used them on many shows, but they have an absolutely horrid diffusion filter. Now, again, this is an older light, old model light. So I went to the lighting director at it was at the Four Seasons Opera House, right, in Toronto. And I asked her, I said, can we get a filter that we'll throw it into the color wheel that would be a frost, a 119 or 132, whatever. And we tried it, and it did not work. I know, you think it would, but it didn't. And you know what I ended up doing? That from then on, if I had to use a 3500, I would just have them duct tape a piece of 119 onto the front of the light. And I just couldn't use gobos for the show. That's basically what I ended up doing, and do to this day, unfortunately, because it's a very good light other than that.
You know, I'm not sure that I have this right. So again, someone from Very Light may want to just call in and say you've lost your mind. But I'm kind of vaguely remembering in the early days, they were trying to solve this problem, and they were doing a TV show or something, and their solution was the exact same solution you had. Just tape the thing on the front.
Yep.
And I think Rusty came in and saw that and lost his mind. He said, what are you doing? We can't tape a piece of diffusion on the front of the light.
It works.
I know at one time they had an accessory holder on the front of the light, and he went, no. We're not going to do that either.
So I may be imagining this, so maybe you guys can correct me, but one, I think the manufacturers kind of say, every time I bring it up, they say, well, just use the focus and just soften it up. Okay. And now I know in my solar theaters there's a diffusion in there, but it's not variable. It just drops in. However, I recall when we changed out the infamous wash light, the VL5, when I was working at the museum 2 years ago, and Scott Rosenfeld had a whole bunch of spare color flags for the VL5s. But not only did he have the RGB color flags, and I have one so I can prove it. You know what they look like? They look like little triangles, right? Like elongated triangles, and they go on. They have these metal clips.
They look like a turbine engine on a jet.
Exactly, like a turbine engine. Exactly. Well, there was a set of diffusers as well.
Yeah.
So do you guys remember in the VL5?
It has it. The VL5 standard with 4 sets. Tell me if I'm wrong. And the last set is diffusion.
That's right. Yeah. So it can be done that way. And I was just thinking about how my solar theaters are set up. The way that they explained to me that the better color mixing on the CMY is not is it's plates, and the plates come in from the side. So it's a box with the three colors and the pieces of glass, and then they come in from the side, and the eye can't really tell, even though it's coming in from this side, how nice it is. And just put in a fourth one of diffusing glass, and then you would have variable diffusion. So I like you, David, I wish for that. I would like to have that. And so there you go.
So our next question is from Jean in Belgium. And Jean asks, what is the difference between phase and polarity? Well, considering that electricians bar me from touching anything with any type of electrical current in it, I'm going to leave this off to Steve and Stan.
I had to look it up. I mean, I thought I understood that, so I did a little research on it. And I'm going to say what I learned simply, and then I'll let Steve take it deeper if he wants. And there's sometimes it's a misnomer in terms of the way they're used. So phase has to do with time. If you think about a circle, 0 and then 90 and then 180 and then 270 and then 360, it's where the electricity is in time is phase. And polarity is just the positive and negative charges being reversed or flipped the other way. So they're not the same. They're not the same thing. And the essential difference, again, phase is about time, how much out of phase it is to another in terms of a circle, and polarity is plus and minus. It's basically magnetism.
I would only throw in there on polarity, you have a baseline or a median line. So you have a curve above the line, a curve below the line.
Right.
In polarity. So Jean, take a picture of yourself, make 2 copies of it, and have one of them in the correct position, and then turn the other one upside down to mirror, and you've got polarity.
Ooh.
Or take one picture and put it in one location, and then put one 90 degrees to the right, and you're 25% out of phase.
Or better yet, take one of those pictures and take it into my Tesla. We'll go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Then you're phasing out, totally phasing out. By the way, guys, I got my Tesla. You guys know that?
Yeah, we heard. We heard all about it. We saw the pictures. We got the birth announcement.
Isn't there one floating in space?
Yes, there is one. It's
clearly they're so cheap you can put them anywhere.
That one. Now that one is out of phase.
That one is way out of phase, but it's in orbit. But it's running over the polarity of the poles. I mean, you've got the North Pole and the South Pole. So when it does its orbit, if it does a polar orbit, it's actually doing phase and polarity at the same time.
Oy, oy, oy. You are listening to Light Talk with Steve, Stan, and David, the Lumen Brothers. And Light Talk is sponsored by
Better Than Nothing Industries. And today they bring us the Hoodoo Voodoo LD Mojo Starter Kit. There comes a time in every designer's life that things start to go south. You just can't keep up with all the new consoles. The arms race and moving lights has left you in the dust, and those leather pants from your last tour have shrunk so much you can't wear them anymore. Don't worry. This is a natural byproduct of aging. Or is it? Perhaps you've just lost your lighting mojo. So, Better Than Nothing Industries, in cooperation with Papa Legba Productions, has a solution for you. All the way from the beautiful waters of the Caribbean comes the Hoodoo Voodoo LD Mojo Bag Starter Kit. Your Hoodoo Voodoo LD Mojo Bag Starter Kit consists of a red flannel bag containing one or more magical items. You can select your item from our list of dozens of magical items an LD might have, such as a spare rim dim button, a positive New York Times review featuring your name, or perhaps you'll just throw in a vial of fog juice. It doesn't matter because you're going to feed that bag with your own items, such as your union card, your first contract, a backstage pass from CBGB's. You get the idea. In a few short months, your mojo will return. The Hoodoo Voodoo LD Mojo Starter Kit from Better Than Nothing Industries, just in time for the fall touring season.
Hey, have you ever lost your mojo?
Can't find it. Still looking.
Yeah, okay. Well, you got to get it because once you lose that mojo, it's all downhill.
I think what's his name? Morrison has it.
Jim Morrison. That's right.
Jim Morrison has my mojo.
Got your mojo
he ran away
working.
with it.
Exactly.
Can you get into your leather pants?
You know something? I never owned leather pants. With all the rock and roll music I did, I never bought a pair of leather pants.
You guys didn't know I was a biker, did you?
No. You didn't. Your pictures, you don't look like a biker.
I still have my red and black leather gloves. I had my fry boots, and I had my leather pants, and I went to see Meatloaf with my girlfriend.
Of course, he was the ultimate rock biker, right?
He was one of them.
I mean, he shows up on what was that great film that he was in? the musical.
Rocky Horror.
Yeah, on
Rocky
the
Horror.
bike, right? He shows
Yeah,
up on
the
the bike.
That's right.
That's pretty cool.
Yep, I went. I can't tell you the woman I went with because she might listen to Light Talk. But back in the day,
Oh, she must have a very boring life.
that was the way to go to. The way you went to Meatloaf is on your motorcycle.
That's funny.
You know when Meatloaf did Rocky Horror Picture Show, he came to the rehearsal in L.A. and he wasn't sure what he was getting into, but he shows up and everybody's there. It's a normal rehearsal, and Tim Curry walks in fully dressed as Frankenfurter. Meatloaf actually got up and left the theater. He says he was about halfway down the block and said to himself, where am I going? I'm broke. And he turned around and walked back to the theater and did the show, and history was made.
History was
Now
made.
you all remember that the original started at the Waverly Theater in Greenwich Village before it was a film, and it was a live production with all of this audience interaction. And I think that Meatloaf was part of that, was he not?
I don't know, but do you remember who played Janet in the movie?
I will when you say it.
Susan Sarandon.
Yes, that's
Right?
right.
Isn't that right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's right.
I think
Yes.
that might be right.
And she was going to do, there was going to be a follow-up, and she did not do it.
You mean like a sequel?
They did not have enough money to get her.
Oh.
And who Barry Boswick, I think,
Yeah,
was
right. The kid.
He actually was booked doing something else, and he wanted to do it too, but he was already committed.
Oh.
So it kind of fell apart. It was going to be the continuing stories of Janet and Brad.
Well, I'm sort of glad they didn't do it because they probably would have screwed it up. The chance of having a good sequel, unless you're George Lucas, although he didn't do so. Anyway, let's move on.
Well, let's
So
move
anyway-
on. Moving on. I'm sorry I brought up the Meatloaf motorcycle thing, but why not?
Okay, so for today's Let's Talk About segment, we're going to discuss the benefits and pitfalls of taking students with you to professional gigs. This all comes from a message I received from a young educator who realizes the value of doing this. He said he was listening to an episode of Light Talk where we were actually talking about bringing students with us to gigs. And, this is something that, we've all done. And I've been doing now for about 30 years. And I must tell you that it's getting kind of crazy now. And because he was asking for personal advice. And I got to say something that it's becoming very, very tricky. Now, understand, when I went to grad school, my professor at the time wasn't doing a lot of professional gigs. So the only experience I got was actually doing internships. I know I did a few at the Dallas Opera. I met, professional designers, and I watched how they worked and all that. And, the school's in Dallas, so it was really no big deal. But my first year out, when Gilbert Hemsley hired me to be his assistant, I experienced it on my very first big professional show as an assistant lighting designer. Gilbert showed up with like 6 students. Gilbert believed that you teach the profession by putting students in the profession. And that's something that I believe in as well. So for many, many years, when I was a professional designer and I started doing larger shows and I could afford it, I would take my students with me. Sometimes I'd take them to Europe, and I took students to Tokyo. I've taken them all over the place. Well, over the years, with our increasingly litigious situations in our universities, that's becoming very, very, very difficult. And now, in order for me to do it, I have to get all these different clearances through the university. There are very strict guidelines. There are insurance issues that you have to be careful about. So it's gotten to a point right now where it's almost impossible for me to do this. Now, the only time I'm taking students with me is when I've established an internship, an actual internship that the producing organization runs, and they hire my students separately, and they pay for their travel, they pay for their lodging and stuff like that. So I'm sort of, pretty much removed from the student. So it's becoming much more difficult. Do you guys have anything to add to this?
I agree. It's impossible for me, really financially anymore, to take a student to Europe. So I'm taking students to L.A. and New York, and you're dead on. Everybody wants to be protected. The student wants to be protected. I want to be protected, and it just makes good sense, I think. The kind of casual and cavalier attitude of the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's just not acceptable anymore. And, most people are honest and decent and honorable people, but there are and it's on both sides of the fence. There are faculty and students who will take advantage of each other or pressure people into doing things that perhaps they wouldn't normally do. So I think the more that we can separate this, the better off we all are, and just concentrate on the work.
Well, I haven't taken a student with me in about maybe 2 years now, but at my institution, these things are, like Steve says, I mean, they're formalized. So they're not informal, hey, we have an internship with the Oslo. It's actually, we have to enroll them in credit. The Oslo has to send feedback. If I take a student, the student fills out the appropriate forms. So we still do that. I do think it's important because it's still sort of an apprenticed profession in a way. We do learn from watching people with more experience. So I think that's helpful. But I do think formalizing this is healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. That just means all the lights are on. Everybody knows what's going on. There's no concern. Everybody is, in a healthy way under scrutiny when engaging in these activities. So I'd hate to see it get lost, but I don't think the formalizing of it is a bad step. I think it's a step in a good direction.
Yeah, it can get out of hand. Like, for instance, when I do take students to local gigs, like if I'm doing a show in LA and I take one or two students or my whole class, I have to register it as a field trip. I am not kidding you. It's got to go through the paper.
Yeah, but that's what it is. That's essentially what it is.
And a lot of it has to do with insurance. It really does, because again, if you're taking a class over, it's important. But things are different back in the 70s and 80s. Gilbert used to bring several of their students. They would share.
That's a different era.
It was a totally different era. And if you knew Gilbert, he was like the sweetest person in the world. And I knew that nothing bad was going on, but it was a different era. It really was. So, yeah, I was just wondering what Gilbert would think of all this stuff that's happening right now. And he'd probably be pretty disappointed, actually, I would think.
I don't know, really, because it's not. I don't see it as an evil villain thing. I think it's just after what just went on, what just came to light in Pennsylvania. I mean, having a sort of sense of responsibility and formality in these types of things is probably healthy.
I would think he would look at it, he would see that part of it, no doubt about it. But, he would bring 5, 6, they were called Gilbert's bunnies. And Mark was a bunny, and I was sort of an honorary bunny, even though I wasn't technically enrolled in his classes. I was still, as an assistant, pretty much a student. He was teaching me everything. He taught me how to be an assistant on the job. So I was sort of in that group. But he would not be able to afford separate hotel rooms for these people. They all went and followed him around the world, and he paid for it. The students weren't paying for it. The school threw in very little money, and I don't know how he ever made any money, but, he was a mensch, a true mensch. And, it's just becoming really impossible. I mean, the most students I ever brought with me were 3, but usually I'd bring 1 student, maybe 2. But now it's just becoming very difficult.
Well, look at it from a different point of view. I mean, what do you do if you have a student with you and all of a sudden you find out they are eating 1 meal a day every other day so they can be there? What do you do if they become injured and you find out they have no health insurance? It's a big responsibility to take someone with you.
Well, absolutely. Even when I started doing this when I was at SMU and earlier on in my academic career, I would always make sure they had insurance, especially if you take them overseas. But yeah, I guess I'm lucky. I'm lucky nothing bad happened like that, Steve. But you're right. Stuff does happen. Sometimes people get arrested, by mistake.
I took a student with me to Poland years and years ago, and I remember the dean, his only question was, who's paying for it? And I said, well, the company's paying for it. And he said, that's great. I'll go ahead and sign a leave for 10 days for the student. That was it. There was no discussion. There was no one even thought to ask the question.
Well, I think also just listening to you guys talk about this and reflecting on the change in times, probably the world, maybe I'm naive by saying this, but I think the world maybe wasn't as dangerous then as it is now.
That's true.
Now, back to Light Talk.
I just realized we had an international episode today. All of our questions are from out of the country.
Oh my God, you're
Nice.
right.
How
Look at
about
that.
William in Canada writes, have you ever been reluctant to work on particular projects because of the subject matter, or because the director's approach wouldn't be a good fit for your style? All right, so William, we call that a twofer. That's two different questions. The first question, projects that are, let's say, controversial, or the subject matter is controversial, I haven't bumped into something that I wasn't interested in working on. But what would keep me from working on that is if the director tried to censor the material. So I don't see much point in doing a controversial play. I don't know, let's say you're doing Jesus Christ Superstar, and you decide at the end of it, Judas isn't going to hang himself, but he's going to become, I don't know what. But, when you start changing the subject matter of the play, that's when I start thinking I shouldn't be involved in this, because I'm really kind of not happy with censorship. And as far as a director's approach, I guess there are directors I'm not interested in working with, but it's not necessarily it's their approach to something. It's because they're kind of a pain in the butt. And I realize that we just don't mesh well together. Their style of their use of time, or how they want to work in the theater, or their priorities. It's not that they're bad directors. It's just that we're in two different worlds, and one is not better than the other. We just don't have a chemistry together.
I've thought about the first part of this question across my entire career, and the way I always posed the question to myself was, if I was asked to work on a project where the message of the project, where what was being communicated was something that I could not, in my own set of principles, and I think everybody has to have principles, were contrary to my principles, yet I needed the money, would I take the work or would I turn down the work? And the answer that always came from me was, no, I wouldn't. So, for example, let's say that somehow I was offered to do a play that the central thesis of the play was that the Holocaust didn't happen. There's a Holocaust denial play. I couldn't do it. I couldn't support something that contradicted a principle that I felt was wrong, because I do believe there's right and wrong in the world. So that's where I stand on the first part of it. On the second part, I never really had that. I think I could be pretty malleable as an artist in terms of, because like Steve, I'm sort of open-minded, and I wouldn't believe in, if a director's approach might not be my approach. And I have had that. I have done shows where I didn't agree with the director's approach, but I think of myself as a professional, and I could still do my best work. I might not have the same passion for it. If they were a pain in the rear, that would be different. If I knew this was going to be a stress-filled situation, I probably would try and avoid it if I could. But pretty much, I'll do anything for anybody as a designer, as a professional, unless it really goes against my own principles.
I don't think you should ever work on something that is so offensive it's going to keep you from doing your best work. However, that being said, I've never personally hit that point. Even on some pieces that you look at very superficially and say, oh my God, it's something I don't believe in at all, there's still something you can get out of it. And this is a business, and I'm going to be real frank. You start turning down jobs, it's hard to get those jobs back from that director. And it's hard to turn anything down. Now, I would never say work on something that's totally against your morals, but try to find a way that you can make it worthwhile for you, because you really can't turn down gigs. Like Steve, there are directors I will not work with, but it has nothing to do with the material. It has to do with the way they work. I'm not saying that their process is incorrect. It just doesn't work with me. And those are the directors you're going to be working with for the rest of your lives, are people that really mesh with you, who give you that freedom, who know and appreciate how you work, and give you the space to work. Not someone who's basically treating you as an electrician. You don't want that to happen ever. And sometimes you have to take a stand. Again, I've never turned down a show because of the material. Not to say that it wouldn't happen. So, good question, though, let me tell you. Hey guys, well, that Hammond organ solo in the background tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. Don't forget to visit our website at lighttalk.org. There you will find our complete schedule of interviews along with other upcoming lighting events. And be sure to follow us on Facebook on our ever-growing Light Talk Facebook group page. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss 1 second of Lumen insanity.
No guarantees are offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
In other words, if you're going to ride a motorcycle, wear a helmet.
Always.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and deep in the heart of Texas.
And be sure to tune in next week when we chat with Sarah Clausen and Ann Valentino from ETC.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
So long, everyone.